Is there anything you need us to do, Dan? Okay. Thank you, Dan. All right, thank you. So we're just waiting on, I think we have 4 more members.
Everyone's
Okay, can you hear me, Dan? Testing.
Hello.
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 Testing.
I hear Beverly. Okay, very good. Dan, I have a question for you. Will the YouTube stream be recorded?
Yes, it was.
So we'll be able to access it after the meeting. Perfect. Great. Let's see.
Good morning. This is April Ernst. I'm here.
Good morning, April. Eyes are getting a little dizzy. Okay, I see Robin Hayes. I thought I saw Adam Ramirez for a second. Maybe he had to disconnect and We'll just wait one more minute to give Adam a chance to get connected. I just resent him the invitation.
He's on, Chris.
Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to the DECs Workgroup meeting. My name is, I don't know where I am on your screen, but the talking head that says Nurse Education. My name is Kristen Benton. I'm Director of Nursing, and there's several staff here that made this meeting possible. And hopefully we will move through this without any tech issues. But if at any point, you can't hear me or you need a break or something, you can just type something in the chat box. One of our staff members will be monitoring that. So I have 10:04 a.m. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. And we'll start with introductions. And because we have such a Brady Bunch of a screen, I think what I'll do is just call people by name and just allow you to wave and introduce yourself. And I know I shared this in the initial email invitation, but we are being live streamed on YouTube and this meeting is being recorded. So why don't we start with Joan Becker. She's representing the Texas Organization for Associate Degree Nursing. Joan, can you hear us?
Chris, if you want to go on, I'll text her.
Okay, I think she's kind of frozen, so she might be having a connection issue. Okay, April Ernst.
Good morning. April Ernst. I am the current president for the Texas Association of Vocational Nurse Educators. And I've served on this work group in 2010. And I'm excited to be here to work on these revisions. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, April, and I see you have an assistant with you today. Okay, Dr. Heather McKnight, who's representing the Texas Organization for Baccalaureate and Graduate Nurse Education.
Everybody, I'm Heather McKnight. I'm at Texas A&M University in Texarkana as the director of testing. I'm really excited about taking on this adventure and getting into these DECs again.
Thank you, Heather. And Valerie Kuiper, who's representing the Texas Organization for Nursing Leadership.
Hi, thank you. I'm actually a replacement for Dr. Paula Webb for tonal, but I'm very glad to be on this group. I'm an associate professor at Texas Tech. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kuiper. And Dr. Renee Schumann, who's representing the Texas Nurses Association.
Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm honored and it's a privilege, and I look forward to this esteemed group. Thank you much for.
Thank you, Dr. Schumann. And we have Dr. Tara Daly, who's representing the Texas League for Nursing.
Hi, good morning, everyone. As Dr. Benton said, I am Tara Daly with Gateway College. I'm also the president for Texas League for Nursing, and it's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Dr. Daly, I think we heard most of what you said, but it was real muffled. I don't know if you have another option for audio, or sometimes if you just step out of the meeting and then reconnect, sometimes it just fixes it magically.
Okay, thank you.
And we have Adam Ramirez, who's representing the LVN Association of Texas.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry. I'm having a little bit of technical issues on here. My apologies. My name is Adam Ramirez. I'm an LVN, first vice president of the LVN 8 LVN Association of Texas. And I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you, Adam. And then we have Karen Schwinn, who's representing the, oh my gosh, I'm losing my acronyms here. I'm sorry, Karen, who are TSNO.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number and dial again. No es posible realizar.
Okay, just a reminder, if you're not speaking, to go ahead and mute. Karen, I think you need, there you go. We're not hearing you, man. Let's see.
She may need to log off and log back in.
Okay, Matt, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, TSNO is the Texas School Nurse Organization. And thank you for the invite and for allowing me to be here to join you today.
Thank you, Karen, and I'm sorry about my bad memory here. And then we have Karen Kendrick with the Texas Hospital Association.
Good morning. I am the Vice President for Clinical Initiatives at the Texas Hospital Association. My first opportunity to participate in this group and look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And we have Robin Hayes with the Texas Healthcare Association.
Good morning, everyone. I am Robin Hayes. I am Senior VP from Touchstone Communities, long-term care communities. I represent the nurses in long-term care through the Healthcare Association. I sit on the only nurse on their board, and I chair their Texas THCA Nurse Council, which is a representation of long-term care clinical senior leadership across multiple providers. So I'm excited about being here and sharing this information back with our other providers within long-term care. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Joan Becker, are you able to?
Yep, I finally connected. I connected via my phone. My computer was not treating me nicely. I'm Joan Becker. I am the Dean of Nursing at El Centro College, and I am here representing the
I think you're muted, Chris.
Thank you. So I think we've introduced all the members. And then I'd like to introduce Tamara Rhodes, who's our board member liaison, representing associate degree education. Tamara, do you want to say hello?
Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I am Tamara Rhodes. I represent Associate Degree Nursing Education on the board, and I am so grateful that you all have joined us today. I'm very excited about working with all of you guys. And on the behalf of the board, I really would like to extend our deepest gratitude for your spending your time and sharing your expertise with us. And I look forward to what we come up with today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then I just want to take a minute to introduce all the staff who will be here today. Dr. Virginia Ayers.
Good morning. I'm an education consultant with the board, and welcome.
And we have Jackie Ballesteros, who's kind of behind the scenes. I don't know if she can hear us to say hello.
Morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
And we have Alex Chamberlain, who's a nurse consultant for practice.
Morning. Thank y'all for being here.
And Dr. Jan Hooper, who's our lead education consultant.
Yes, we're very excited about this day. We've been working up to this for a very long time, so thank you.
And Elise McDermott, our lead consultant for practice.
Good morning. Looking forward to our meeting today.
Thanks, Elise. And Timothy Sherman, he's a nurse consultant for practice.
Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Beverly Skloss, a nurse consultant for education.
Good morning, Beverly, education consultant. Thank you for being here.
And last but not least, Dr. Gail Vernell, who's a consultant for education also.
Welcome and good morning.
Thank you. And we also have Sierra Williamson, who is our executive assistant, who's helping behind the scenes. And you might see an icon for Dan Fletcher, and he is our IT director who's helping keep us afloat during today's meeting. Thank you, Dan. All right, so we've gotten through the first item on our agenda. Everyone should have received a pretty hefty PDF of all of the documents that we'll be referring to today. And I'll try not to make you guys dizzy, but I'll share my screen and try to work through those so that we're all looking at the same thing at the same time. And, you know, this is all new to us. We've had a few of our meetings virtually, but bear with us as we work through today and all the technology. So one of the things we thought would be helpful to kick us off with was, of course, reviewing the board's mission. So I'll read that. The mission of the Board of Nursing is to protect and promote the welfare of the people of Texas by ensuring that each person holding a license as a nurse in the state of Texas is competent to practice safely. The board fulfills its mission through the regulation of the practice of nursing and the approval of nursing education programs. This mission, derived from the Nursing Practice Act, supersedes the interest of any individual, the nursing profession, or any special interest group. And then I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Rhodes to just review the charge for this work group today.
I'm so sorry. I'm having difficulties unmuting myself today for some reason. Thank you for bearing with me. Our charge today is to convene a work group comprised of nursing education and practice stakeholders to review and update the differentiated essential competencies of graduates of Texas nursing programs based on current literature, standards, and nursing education. And thanks again for helping us out with this today.
Thank you, Tamara. And if you haven't had a chance to look over today's agenda, we'll provide an overview of the history behind the DECs, and then we'll start breaking it down into the competencies. And staff, as Dr. Hooper stated, have been working on reviewing these for quite some time. Dr. Hooper, more than anyone else, probably for the past 2 years, she's done extensive preparation and research to get ready for today. And so you'll hear from, throughout the meeting, you'll hear from various staff members who have taken on certain areas to present some proposed revisions. And we invite your feedback, of course, and any other ideas you might have. But we thought it would be good to start with a basic overview of the big picture and then get down into the details of each section. Because this is an official work group meeting, we should have a chair, and hopefully by the detail of the agenda, whoever is the brave, courageous soul who volunteers to chair the meeting has a very easy script to go by. Essentially, it would just entail calling on the staff members for each section in the agenda. So with that said, are there any nominations or volunteers who would like to serve to chair this meeting? Oh, come on.
I'll volunteer to chair.
Who was that? Heather?
Heather.
Thank you, Dr. McKnight. And you know, we'll help along the way. No worries.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Is everyone agreeable? If you'll raise your hand, if you're agreeable, give a thumbs up. All right, perfect. Great, congratulations, Dr. McKnight. So if you want to go ahead and take over, and we are running about 10 minutes ahead of time, which is great. You can go ahead and call for the first presentation.
Okay, let's call for the historical perspective from Beverly Klaus.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to share my screen as soon as I get the handouts pulled up here. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And thank you again, everybody, for being here today. The title of this presentation is Review and Update, because it's been determined that the DECs are withstanding the test of time, but need updating in terminology and current practice. Many programs have them embedded into their curricula and will welcome the new revisions. There are several of us here today, as you heard April mention earlier, that we're part of the Advisory Committee on Education, better known as the ACE Committee, and or the work group that developed the original DECs. I served on the ACE Committee when these were developed. I was also a program director that, along with faculty, incorporated the DECs into the program curriculum. So I'm very excited to be a part of the review and updates now as board staff. Next slide. When the original appointed committee began the work of developing a set of state competencies, they established these guidelines. These are still very pertinent and probably explain why the competencies have remained viable through several revisions. Notice they are focused on the client, not on the nurse. They are not a list of tasks or skills. They are designed to offer the competencies in terms of the knowledge of the nurse and how that knowledge is applied to the responsibilities, behaviors, and nursing judgment. The application of the DECs can be made for all levels of education and across the curriculum, as well as describe program outcomes. Next slide. This is a historical perspective of the development of the DECs, with the first charge from the board to prepare a set of nursing competencies. The name has morphed into the title of Essential Competencies for Nursing Graduates that indicate the differentiation based upon the education preparation. Nursing programs provide the knowledge for carrying out the competencies, though all may not occur during clinical instruction, but graduates are prepared to obtain the competency in practice. Next slide. There are 25 basic or core competencies arranged under 4 nursing roles. The competencies are further expanded into sub-competencies that are measurable. For each sub-competency, an outline of necessary knowledge for each of these competencies is provided. The knowledge allows the nurse to possess the rationales for nursing care and the skills for action. Next slide. There are 4 nursing roles I mentioned. Member of the nursing profession was viewed as the first role to be fulfilled by the nurse. Provider of patient-centered care is the expression of caring and skills exhibited by the nurse, again, based upon the educational preparation. An overriding concept underlying all nursing care is safety, thus patient safety advocate. Lastly, the nurse's role as a member of the healthcare team gives the nurse the important part of patient care that is nursing. Next slide. If the DECs could talk, they may state these 4 messages, and the outcome is for every nurse to think like this. I am a member of the nursing profession. I am here to care for you. My most important job is to advocate for your safety, and I am a member of the healthcare team providing your care. Next slide. The DECs are not all inclusive, but present the expectations for nursing program graduates in Texas, once again based upon their education. Next slide. When you look at the DECs, this is the stream of competency broken down to subcompetency with accompanying needed knowledge, then what the nurse can do with the knowledge and skill. Next slide. This is one of the 25 core competencies provided under Provider of Patient-Centered Care. This one deals with assessment. As a competency moves across the educational level, you can see the progression is what the nurse is able to do for the patient. Next slide. As the competency is broken down into subcompetencies, the skill level grows in complexity. Next slide. The growing complexity in skill level means the nurse's knowledge base is also enriched. Next slide. These are some ways the DECs can be used in nursing education programs. The rules require that students are prepared to demonstrate the DECs and that the DECs provide a basis for the program. Next slide. The DECs are also useful in nursing practice. They also may provide guidance in developing job descriptions and career ladders in nursing practice. Employers can find the differentiation in practice accountability for each educational level and license. Next slide. Board staff use the DECs in their evaluation of nursing education, as well as in reviewing proposals for new programs. Next slide. Most nursing programs also use the QSIN competencies in their curricula. These slides show how the DEC competencies in the 4 roles match the QSIN competencies. This slide is for the VN level, and the red lettering is specific wording for the VN level. Next slide. This similar slide for the ADN level indicates how the competencies match the QSIN and how the competencies have progressed to new skill levels. Next slide. This slide for BSN education adds on a high level of performance based upon further knowledge in this degree level and the possibility for career opportunities. Next slide. These have been goals for the current revision. 2 new items with the revision are a conceptual model and a table considering DECs that are most effectively taught in the clinical area. Next slide. Thank you today for being here again, and are there any questions at this point? If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, to write them into the chat, and we'll be glad to look at those. Thank you.
Okay, since there's no questions, we'll move on to preparatory steps by Dr. Jan Hooper.
Thank you, Dr. McKnight. And I'm glad to see that we're staying on time because I do have a few things to say. I want to tell you how we got to where we are today. And many programs have been asking recently, when are you going to update the DECs? And so we've had a lot of things get in our way, like legislative session and COVID and things like that, but we finally just jumped in and started moving ahead. And we're so happy that you're a part of this team. I do want to emphasize what Beverly said is put anything in the chat box. You can see that some of our verbals don't come across as well. And so if we have it in writing, it helps us. And as we go along and we have time, Beverly's going to be monitoring the chat box and she'll bring up things that were discussed or questioned so that we can hopefully explain or get a new idea. And for Dr. McKnight, your biggest job is keeping us on time. So you might have to say, whoa, you're done. It's really great that Texas has these because not many states have state competencies that all programs are preparing their graduates for, and we do have that. And the last time, 10 years ago, it took us 2 years to get to the point of having this document. I'm sure you, if you were there, you remember the long meetings, and the group would choose to come back and meet for 2 or 3 days at a time over a 2-year period. And there was a lot of discussion. I won't say conflict. There was a lot of discussion. No, we do that. No, we also do that. Well, you don't all do everything. So we have to figure out what we do. So a couple of years ago, I chose to support myself to go to the CUSIN conference because that is such a big part of our education and practice today. And I prepared a paper to present on how we use CUSIN in the DECs. So I was able to present that paper, and many people were very interested because even though programs are adopting CUSIN, they don't have an overview to put it under as we do. So that's a wonderful part. So during the 2 years after that, I've been collecting from the other consultants and from ideas and meetings and educators, thoughts about new things that need to be worked into the DECs. And we have put together a pretty nice reference list. You see it as one of your handouts. And it is annotated along the way to show what in that document seemed important to our DECs. Our DECs are never going to have every competency a nurse should possess, but it should have the competencies we expect the education programs to be preparing them for. So those references then gave us a point to look at and see what is in these different references that we need to update from previous references or add new content. And some of the terms that came up were service excellence, global health, self-care, social determinants of health, vulnerable populations, workplace violence, civility, and cybersecurity, and very pertinent with the pandemic currently. So you'll see those new terms worked into the DECs, and you'll see some modernization of some of the competencies in the DECs. This team of staff that you see have met very diligently 4 times in the last few months. And we appreciate having practice join us in a heavy force because, you know, these are not just for graduates of programs. These are for nurses in practice. And often when nurses call our agency or supervisors call our agency and ask, can my new nurse do this? Or can our nurses do this? We go back to the DECs to see exactly what it says, that it fits what they're asking about. It fits practice. Also, the practice consultants bring in a lot of ideas that they use in their workshops, and they do continually update position statements and rules. So it helped to bring it up to the today. I think it's been a good experience for all of us to be working together on this. And Chris said I did a lot of work, but you know, it just takes somebody to push it out and then the others pick it up and straighten it out. So that's how
two tasks in the ADN and the BSN. So we had some discussion about ensuring that it was clear that when a nurse assigns, makes an assignment or delegates to an unlicensed person, it's not truly assigning or delegating the care, the comprehensive nursing care. It's assigning nursing tasks or delegating nursing tasks. Okay, and then here's the exciting piece that we think you guys will have a lot of great input to, given our current scenario that we're in. We added the competency related to the concept of global health. And this is new. This will be a new addition. And so as you read across each of the columns, I'll give you a second, I'll stop talking so you can think. What we want to see is a progression from the LVN scope to the ADN to BSN. Yes. Oh, should I repeat or go back later and re-record? What's your suggestion? Yeah. Okay. 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 Okay, I tell you what, I'll finish up my presentation and then go back and do a summary, and hopefully that will fill the gap. How's that
Dan,
sound?
did the whole group lose that or just the recording?
Chris, can you talk? This is Gail. Can you talk a little louder?
Sure.
Yours
Can you hear me
is
okay?
soft. Yours was soft. I think if you
Okay.
talk louder, it'll be perfect.
Thank you. Okay. So we're at the end of the road here of the 25 core competencies, and you'll see G is a new suggestion to add the concept of global health and the role of each level of educated nurse in global health. And so you'll see a graduation of the verbs used in terms of complexity, from assist to participate to coordinate and collaborate. And so, like I said, I'll give you guys some quiet. And if you have any suggestions to any of these, not just those that are suggested to be revised, please share those in the chat box. Okay, I don't see anything in the chat box, so I'm going to go back and just recap that we have gone through some of the staff recommendations for revisions for the 25 core competencies of the DECs by each role, each of the 4 roles, with some minor revisions to the first role, member of a profession, just to add the term regulation. And then moving on to provider of patient-centered care, some edit to include the concept of personal identity and spirituality. And then to add the term comprehensive to the associate degree assessment competency. And then just a non-substantive edit of a term of from material to physical when referring to resources used in patient care. And addition of the verb or the concept of management in the baccalaureate education level. There were no suggested changes or edits to the role of patient safety advocate. And then in the role of member of the healthcare team, A and D were thought to be somewhat redundant, so we recommend striking D and adding the concept of timeliness into A with communication and collaboration with members of the healthcare team. And then with regard to assigning and delegating, replacing the term care with tasks to describe or to better convey that the nurse is still providing the nursing care and overseeing the nursing care of the patient. And then finally, we recommended adding a new competency under this role that describes the responsibilities of each nurse with relation to global health and global health emergencies. Okay. Looks like there's a new chat. So does section G mean that in case of global health emergency that nurses can practice in non-compact states? And that's a question from Adam. I don't know that it specifically would mean that. We as an agency have to have the governor's permission through a waiver or temporary policy during a disaster to waive any of our regulations related to licensure. Right now, that is in place during the disaster period. But I don't know that this would automatically translate to that action, but it's certainly related. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Dr. McKnight?
Yeah, I want to check with Dan first to make sure our audio is back up before we move forward. Okay. Any suggestions on that? Dr. Ayers?
Good morning. Thank you. My presentation this morning will focus on the nursing role, member of the profession. Kristen, do you need to move the slides forward? Oh, thank you. And we are all familiar with and support this role as evidenced by our participation in today's meeting. This role was intentionally listed first in the DECs, as serving as a member of the nursing profession is an underlying principle, and we all want to be exemplary nurses, positive role models, but this is the heart of nursing, a member of the profession. So I would like to highlight the proposed changes in this section for your consideration today. And Alex identified the basic concepts. And if I could circle back to the legal scope of practice, and you'll see highlighted here, function within the nurse's legal scope of practice and in accordance with regulation and the policies and procedures of the employing healthcare institution or practice setting. The legal scope of practice is the basic construct of nursing practice, as we are licensed by state statute for initial entry as well as ongoing practice. And the mission of the Board of Nursing, although the meeting began this morning with the reading of the mission statement, this regulates everything we do. Public safety is at the heart of the mission, and it's operationalized in a threefold manner: initial licensure, ongoing practice, and then the approval of nursing education programs. So I did want to emphasize that particular piece. Section B, under knowledge, there were no recommended changes any further in A. And if we go down to section B, about the knowledge, and the statement as previously written was safe harbor, and board staff are recommending a change to nursing peer review. And this revision broadens the topic, as nursing peer review includes incident-based or safe harbor. Peer review is the evaluation of nursing services, the qualifications of a nurse, the quality of patient care rendered by nurses, the merits of a complaint concerning a nurse or nursing care, and a determination or recommendation regarding a complaint. There are two kinds of nursing peer review: incident-based, in which case peer review is initiated by a facility, association, school, agency, or any other setting that utilizes the services of nurses. The second type of peer review is safe harbor, which may be initiated by an individual nurse, LVN, RN, APRN, prior to accepting an assignment or engaging in requested conduct that the nurse believes would place patients at a risk of harm, thus potentially causing the nurse to violate the nurse's duty to the patient. Invoking safe harbor in accordance with Board Rule 21720 protects the nurse from licensure action by the board, as well as from retaliatory action by the employers. So this change will really broaden the topic. Let's go down to number 7. Okay. The recommendation for this change is to revise the description of professional characteristics across all columns to be consistent with rule changes that occurred during the last legislative session. And this is an appropriate place to add service excellence, as that includes recent concerns about non-nursing task skills that really are needed by nurses. They're very important, the soft skills, the customer service skills. So as you read across the 3 levels, you can see these are all in alignment. Now let's examine the clinical judgments and behaviors. And this is about accountability again, to practice in alignment with the Texas laws and regulations. And in order to apply this competency to all columns to the nurse, rather than, it's not just the graduate, it's the long-term nursing practice. This recommendation is to reflect nursing practice according to regulations, not limiting this to merely passing the nursing jurisprudence examination prior to licensure. We can scroll down to number 6 at this time. And again, the focus is on nursing peer review rather than just safe harbor. Number 7, these changes would follow through with the revisions in professional characteristics related to rule changes, and again, includes service excellence as the nurse recognizes and works to meet patient needs. And that's across all 3 columns. Number 9, this revision would focus on professional behavior instead of focusing on appearance at all levels. And when reading this and seeing the word comportment, I immediately think of Dr. Patricia Benner's work. And I think her research centered on formation and everyday ethical comportment, but this is a much higher level element rather than appearance. And again, this is consistent across the 3 levels. I think we can go down to section D, knowledge related to lifelong learning, number 3. Okay. Again, the addition for pathways for academic progression really emphasizes the focus for vocational nurses and associate degree prepared nurses to be able to move forward with their goals of lifelong learning and pursuing an advanced nursing degree. Section D, number 6, engage in self-care practices that promote work-life balance. And since this concept of self-care was such an important focus during the Year of the Nurse, the sub-competency related to self-care across all columns was added because the nurse who manages individual self-care, personal care, will be in a much better situation to provide competent and effective patient care. We need to take care of ourselves prior to others. So this was added as a new number. I think that's it for my topic. Any questions?
Ginny, I don't have a question, but I'd just like to add that the team probably realized at the beginning of each role, there's a kind of an overview of describing the responsibilities of that role. And we did add self-care because it seemed like that was a good place to enter that as a new concept. And then Virginia just told us about the behavior that follows that. Thank you, Chris, for all that backward scrolling. But you will notice every one of the roles has that description in the beginning, and those are good descriptions. The old team wrote that years ago.
Thank you, Jan. Dr. McKnight?
Thank you, Dr. Adair. I didn't see any chat box either. Just a thank you for being proactive on self-care. It looks like we are really ahead of schedule at this point. Our next agenda item is lunch. So Kristen, do you want to just move forward with adjusting the schedule?
I think that'd be great if everyone's amenable to just moving ahead. And just to accommodate some of the live stream recording, the audio issues, I thought it might be helpful if Alexandria could just give a very brief summary of her section before we move to the next.
Sounds good to me. So Alex, would you like to do the summary for overview of the major concepts in the DECs?
Certainly. Thank you all for listening to me one more time. Hopefully this works. So it'll be page 27 of our handout. Okay, great. So the part of my presentation included a walkthrough of the major concepts under each competency. When we look at these, there are 25 competencies under each nursing role. So when we study each competency and outline the main concepts for each competency, it gives us a map of where to place nursing activities. We talked about the first role as a member of the profession, which means belonging to the profession of being a nurse, like we talked about. It includes our legal scope of practice, accountability for nursing care, professionalism, and that the nurse realizes the necessity of professional growth. Then we go into the role of provider of patient-centered care, which includes clinical reasoning and decision-making, patient assessment, analysis of patient assessment, goals for plan of care, safe and competent nursing care, evaluation of patient responses, patient teaching, coordination of care. Then we get into patient safety advocate, which focuses on the concept of safety, which are simple concepts leading to safe care, which include regulations, quality and safety of patient care, reduction of patient risk, seeking instruction and training, mandatory reporting, delegation and assignment. And last but not least, member of the healthcare team, which acknowledges the importance of strong team collaboration in patient care, including communication and collaboration, advocacy, continuity of care, use of technology, delegation and assignment, supervision, and global health, which is new. I believe that kind of sums things up. I'll give it back to you, Dr. McKnight.
Thank you, Alex, for that repeat overview. It looks like I had the nods that will move forward. So we'll move forward to suggested revisions to provider of patient-centered care with Dr. Gail Varnell.
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Ma'am.
Okay. Good morning. I'm going to be talking about provider of patient-centered care. It's a long section, but the changes are really not so many. So the first one is the suggested changes for the subcompetencies under provider of patient care is under A, knowledge related to clinical reasoning, and it's number 2. The characteristics of vulnerable patients was added to the ADN and BSN levels because of recent concerns about vulnerable patients who are seen by professional nurses. Vulnerable patients populations is one of the terms that needs a little more emphasis in the DECs because since it is mentioned in much of the current literature. It is mentioned in one of the sub-competencies for BSN level, but most RNs may be caring for patients in the vulnerable category. In the NLN literature, it does indicate that usually nurses with advanced education work with vulnerable patients, though LVNs may also encounter them. Okay, moving on to under knowledge related to assessment, which is number 12 on page 6. Okay.
Gail, it's going to be page 49.
Oh, no. Okay. Number 12. Wherever number 12 is, there it is. Okay. Social determinants of health was added as a current concern in identifying underlying factors that contribute to health or illness across all levels. Okay, and you will see that there is a follow-through of social determinants of health and clinical judgment and behaviors for all levels under 9B. It states identify health risks related to social determinants of health. Then under knowledge related to analyzing data, number 2, we added the word electronic before information for VN level to be consistent with the other levels. This needed to be added to LVN since they also are involved with electronic charting and data. Moving on, number 4, related to collaboration. We added interdisciplinary collaboration to the VN level to be consistent with the other levels. Then the next change is, dare say, it's not 11 anymore. Knowledge related to providing safe, compassionate care. 1D now reads aspects of professional behavior that conform to generally accepted standards of nursing care and of regulation. And that's for all levels. Okay, let's see, moving on to clinical judgments and behaviors. Page 55, number 1 is to follow through on correct language related to professional characteristics and rule changes across all levels. Professional values was replaced with aspects of professional character. Then after that, the next revision will be on 24 I have, but that's not right, I'm sure. On number 3, maybe it is. Okay, civility was added to 3A and 3B. Prevention of workplace violence across all levels, since data and research indicate a growing concern in the healthcare work setting. Furthermore, just culture was added to 3C for the BSN level to include educational content related to just culture. Under clinical judgments and behaviors, there was number 2, there was the addition of number 2, report threatening or violent behavior in the workplace as a nurse, as a nursing action to maintain a safe environment for patients and staff, as well as a change in number 3 to replace material with physical resources for ADN and BSN levels. I think we still have time to get Tim in before lunch, I'm not sure.
Yes, ma'am, lunch is scheduled at 11:45.
I do not see any comments in the chat or questions.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start talking. And I am going to cover a brief overview of the rationale for the proposed edits to the sub-competencies for patient safety advocate. As previously mentioned, there were no updates or proposed edits to the core competencies. Not as numerous as what Gail has covered, but still some very important edits here. Our first change is within core competency A under clinical judgments and behaviors, number 1. Here we have attain and maintain nursing licensure. And maintain was the addition here in an effort to capture that a nurse's licensure-related responsibilities do not end once they obtain licensure. To continue to practice nursing, a nurse must maintain their license, and that is essential. Our second edit within clinical judgment behavior, number 6 here, isn't a substantial edit. It's the inclusion of nursing in this point is to make this statement reflect the terminology used in our board rules to refer to peer review as nursing peer review. And then let's move on to our third edit. This is found in core competency B. This will be related to quality and patient safety care under knowledge, number 3. So this is probably the most substantial edit to this particular role. And some of this language was also used. Gail had mentioned some changes associated with a safe work environment, and we can see that here as well. We have the addition of point B related to de-escalation of potential or actual violent behavior, and C, civility versus incivility. This change is for all 3 columns, and it's significant. Point B reflects to the importance of de-escalation as a first-line response to potential violence and aggression in healthcare settings, and this is necessary to protect patients, staff, and other patients and those that are involved from injury. Point C reflects the role a safe work environment plays on patient safety. We have civil behavior, this term here being used to reflect aspects of civil behavior, including tolerating, listening, respecting, and treating others with dignity and honor, versus incivility, kind of the opposite there, berating behaviors, insulting others, showing disrespect. We know that incivility has a tendency to lead to unsafe working conditions and stress, poor patient care. I saw burnout mentioned in the comment, and increased medical costs. Our fourth change, immediately below that, also probably the most significant change associated with this role. Virginia mentioned some rationale associated with this previously, and I'm going to kind of reiterate some things that she's already mentioned because I think they were important, and it kind of speaks to why you'll see this change throughout the DECs. But safe harbor has been removed and nursing peer review has been added. We have 2 types of nursing peer review, and safe harbor as a term doesn't appropriately capture instance-based nursing peer review because safe harbor nursing peer review and incident-based are distinctly different. And coming from the point of view of a practice consultant, I can see some definite benefit referring to safe harbor peer review using nursing peer review as a term, because just in speaking with nurses, I often see that when people think about peer review, they think about incident-based, and they think about safe harbor as not really being a type of peer review, and they're oftentimes unsure of what would follow, if anything, once they invoke safe harbor. So I think this is a good change to refer to both safe harbor and incident-based nursing peer review as nursing. Then we see our fifth change there on the screen. We have the inclusion of caring, or the edit from care to caring, the inclusion of safety, which is just a general focus of this entire role, and the inclusion of the healthcare team and others at the end, once again, to kind of reflect on how important a safe work environment is. And the term others would indicate that this is not an all-inclusive list of everything that everyone potentially involved. Let's see. Our next change we're going to make a jump to core competency E, related to mandatory reporting. Number 2, here we have again the same change we have previously referenced. for the same rationale, safe harbor being changed to nursing peer review. And then our final change under core competency F, related delegation and assignment, we're looking at under clinical judgments and behaviors, number 1, the addition of and administrative responsibilities. And this change is to reflect how nurses being involved with administrative responsibilities is becoming more prevalent, and that has been seen through the National Council's practice analysis. And I think that would be all of the edits for this role. And I'm looking in the chat to see if I see any questions. I can only see those that have been asked of everyone. If anybody else sees any other questions, let me know.
I do not see any questions for everyone, just a few comments.
Okay. Well, the next content to cover would be Elise with our next role. I'm not sure exactly what she thinks her time may be for her discussion, and I may reference or hand it off to her to see if she thinks she could address it in what time we have left before our scheduled break.
Looks like there's a question if we can go back to provider of care and discuss the vulnerable populations first, which would have been, where's that at? Dr. Barnell, I believe.
Okay. I'm trying to find the question.
Tamara Rhodes has asked, could we go back to provider of care and discuss vulnerable populations? And then April Ernst has suggestions for VA competencies under profession and safety. So we'll start with Tamara's vulnerable population question.
I am not seeing it on mine, so I'm sorry. Can she just say, Tamara, what is your question?
This is Beverly. She's asking, she said, could we go back to provider of patient-centered care and discuss vulnerable populations? That's from April.
Okay, I didn't see it. What is it? We've got the list of definitions. I don't have it right in front of me. Jan, do you have it?
I do have it. And Tamara, we spent a lot of time reading a lot of literature about vulnerable populations and about global health. But the definition that we have come up with for vulnerable patients or populations, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Those at greater risk for poor health status and health care access, and they experience significant disparities in life expectancy and access to health care services, morbidity, and mortality. Their health needs are complex, intersecting with social and economic conditions they experience. This population is also likely to have one or more physical or mental health conditions. I know one of the papers I read from NLN questioned whether vulnerable populations should be a part of LVN practice, and the conclusion at the end was that really you need a higher level of education in order to have expertise in working with vulnerable patients. Does that help? Does that help at all?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yay. My big concern was the definition of vulnerable populations, because I was concerned that perhaps our geriatric population would fit underneath that, but it sounds it's much like it might be much bigger than our geriatric population?
Yes, it's much broader. You just say those at greater risk. Well, you can, but some patients are going to be at a higher risk for problems because of their access to care and the availability of care, and then the knowledge that the nurse or the other providers may have with working with many other problems that surround their vulnerability. So it is a very complicated issue, but when we put this in as a knowledge, that means programs should address this in their curriculum.
Okay, thank you. I feel good about the wording and what y'all have done. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And then April said she has suggestions for VN competencies under profession and safety.
How extensive are your suggestions, April?
I'm so sorry. I'm
All
having
right.
technical difficulty with
All
my mic.
right. I'm thinking if you have significance that you could either email them to us or put it in the chat box. Either way would be very, very helpful.
Okay, well,
Unless it's just something very simple, we could address it now.
I think we can all see it. It's fairly simple.
All right.
Back on member of the profession under the main competency B, and then within that under the clinical judgments and behaviors, it was competency number 4 there, and I think it goes back to page 38. I'd like to know if we could add the B that is there, that is the same for the ADN and the BSN, because the vocational nurse, of course, evaluates their own learning needs, but they do look at peers and others in the work environment, and they should intervene in that. That's really part of their role, and I would say especially in long-term care is my belief.
I think we can take that as a very serious recommendation.
Okay.
And I appreciate it very much. Those are the kinds of things that are very helpful to us. I think Chris is moving that over now. I'm probably going to underline it and highlight it. I know when we get to the end of the day, we're going to talk about how we reach out to others and get other input. So you're our key input group.
Excellent.
So these will be available to the programs and practice, so they can also give us feedback. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, April.
Yes, and then I did have one more under provider of patient-centered care. On page 44, it was under the first competency A, and it was number 1 under knowledge. I just wanted to know if we could add a systematic problem-solving process in the care of patients and their families based on science and evidence-based practice, because I know that's listed for the ADN and the BSN, and certainly our problem-solving process would be based on science and evidence-based practice.
Are there any comments from the associate degree people now? Or from Adam? You're an LVN, right?
I'm sorry, can everybody hear me? I was having some technical difficulties. Is everybody able to hear me okay?
We hear you.
Okay. No, I agree. I agree with that. I do. Yeah, I would be. And this is talking about the systematic problem solving process, or is this? I'm sorry, I was kind of like it was kind of going in and out a little bit, and I didn't quite catch the end of the question.
Well, this is April. I just under provider of patient-centered care under A, clinical reasoning and knowledge competency. Just item 1 under knowledge, that our systematic problem-solving process at the vocational level is also based on science and evidence-based practice. Because we identified the basis of that under ADN and BSN, but we just, it looks like it's just left off of vocational nursing.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I absolutely agree.
We have to remember that each program category has a greater intensity of preparation. And so I agree that we need something there, April. So let us work on that, and we appreciate it.
Okay, great. That's what I have.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like there's no more questions in the chat box unless there's some that aren't to everyone. And we're at 11:32 with our lunch scheduled for 11:45. Don't feel we can give a member of healthcare profession its due time in that short period. So Kristen, do we want to come back at, let me see here, what we're supposed to come back at 12:30 or at 12:15 from lunch?
I think if the group is okay with 12:15, I think that would work.
Is everybody okay with 12:15?
12:15 is good.
All right, we'll see y'all back here then.
Great, thank you. So I know we have one more staff presentation, but I wanted to just draw to everyone's attention. For some reason, Dr. Kuiper couldn't get into the chat function. It disabled on her, and she was trying to make a suggestion. And that was that we add the term just culture to all levels of nursing. And that was back, I can pull it up under provider of patient-centered care. Let's see, share. Where did it go? There we
So
go.
Chris, if I might ask a question, Dr.
Sure.
Kuiper, I appreciate your comment. So at number 3, you were thinking, I know you're thinking in connection with the safe environment, right? And number C, under the last 2 columns, so we need to work in some place for
Dr. Hooper, were you asking a question? Your voice faded out a
Oh,
little.
I'm sorry. Let me
It's okay.
get a little closer. I was asking Dr. Kuiper, just to make sure that we consider the just culture in the right place under each column.
Yes, ma'am.
So you mean for it to be in the area of safe environment?
Yes, ma'am. I
All
would
right.
ask for consideration of that simply because I come from the practice environment before I came into academia as a CNO for a long time. And the promotion of just culture is throughout. It's something that is conceptually present at all levels in most organizations.
I
Yes,
just wonder
ma'am.
if we've got the just culture in the right objective. That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, perhaps.
So let us take that back. We'll give this very serious thought, and I appreciate your expressing that.
Thank you.
That's all I wanted to bring up before we got started.
Okay, so we'll move on to suggested revisions to the member of the healthcare profession with Elise McDermott.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Okay, great. So I'm Elise McDermott, and as we talked about at the beginning, I am on the practice side of things. And so several of us practice consultants worked with the education consultants, and we were super excited. We teach a lot with the DECs in our workshops, and we answer phone calls, emails with nurses, and we really kind of reflect for nurses to think back about their educational preparation. So we really thought it was an awesome opportunity to get to work with the education team to kind of think about what have we seen progress since the last time the DECs was created, to see where we could add some things that we see that nurses have issues with on the practice side. So we were super excited to be a part of this. So I'm also very nerdy about this section. I was super excited to get to present it. So member of the healthcare team, this competency is going to have some large changes. You're going to see collapsing of a couple of the sub-competencies together, and then a creation of an entirely new sub-competency, which is really new, timely, and progressive. So we're really excited about the addition of that as well. So as far as the first change that you will see, we will note, actually, Chris, will you make a note for us that I realized that when we were going over the 25 main competencies that we forgot in here, that it's communicate and collaborate, in a timely manner. We forgot to add that to each of these. So just kind of as a reminder that this main competency was in a timely manner. And we had an internal discussion with everyone that our laws and rules don't say a specific time that a nurse has to document within an hour or, in long-term care or home health, within 24 hours of a visit or something. But we do talk about that it's very important for nurses to understand the timeliness of things. There's certain things that, okay, maybe I could chart that a little bit later, but this patient is having a huge change. I need to communicate this immediately with the provider. So we thought it was important to add in a timely manner to each of the competencies you see there. So the first big change that you'll see is that this subcompetency A and D were collapsed into one. So as Chris mentioned earlier today, that's because they both dealt with collaboration, communication. And we felt rather than having two separate things that were rather redundant, how could we collapse them in together and still capture all of the aspects that were there? So you'll see here, the first thing we did in one was we added in including group dynamics or the group process. That's going to be because you'll see that the group process, nurses don't work in a silo. Nurses, even among ourselves or within being a member of the healthcare team, it's very important that we understand those group dynamics. Before in subsection or in subcompetency D, there were very specific portions or line items related to that group dynamics. Instead, we kind of collapsed into that topic or that concept of group dynamics, group process, and added it up here in A1B. Next, you will see in 2 that we added a little bit to the LVN level. Before, it was just methods of effective communication and cooperation. And we really felt that some of the other words or terms that were used at the ADN and BSN levels are also important at the VN level. So principles of effective communication and collaboration with patients, their families, and the interdisciplinary team. We know that LVNs have to have supervisors in their nursing practice when they're out there practicing. So they have to really make sure that they can communicate with their patients and their families effectively, but also when reporting things to their supervisor, to the rest of the interdisciplinary team to make sure that the best care is being provided for that patient. Then going on to 3, here is where you will see a true melding of the subcompetencies of A and D. Many of the concepts that are added here are not new so much as moving from D into A. Other areas that were struck here, it's because we felt that when we collapsed them together, we really addressed all of those. So we kind of took away some and added in what came in from D. So keep in mind, again, kind of the same concept. So with 3B, a lot of the words and terms that you see there were in D. And then when they were in D as a knowledge set, they then had specific clinical behaviors and judgments associated with them. So when we brought them up to A, we kept it more global, more broad. So what you'll see here is when we talk about data collection, problem solving, basic time management, those are going to be conveyed in the clinical judgments and behaviors when we talk about a nurse being a part of the team. Because each one of those aspects that a nurse must have knowledge of will then be seen in their clinical behaviors when they are working as a team. So you'll see we don't have as many, a nurse must show examples of basic time management. Now we're looking at that timeliness factor, that communication, and more globally looking at how are they acting in that team aspect. So you'll see a lot of those terms came up into the knowledge area, but you'll see that the clinical judgments and behaviors did not really change. And that's because we felt that a lot of these terms were addressed when we went from knowledge into the skills, but the judgment and behaviors were more global. Does that make sense? So we have all of this being collapsed together, but really the clinical judgments and behaviors that you see in this A section were global enough to meet all of these knowledge tidbits that we added. So that's why you see a lot of changes to the knowledge, but not as much of the changes to the clinical judgments and behaviors. Just making sure there's not any questions with that concept that I might have made it a little bit confusing. All right. Next will be under knowledge B. And this will be related to three across, which is B and then A in the other sections. So again, just as everyone else has talked about today, as Virginia and Tim both mentioned, we're adding nursing here. So kind of a little bit of a different perspective as to why we thought nursing is important here. You'll see that, Virginia and Tim both talked about the two different types of nursing peer review. But what also is important here is across the United States, peer review is used as a different term. There's a different way of doing it. It can be chart audits, it can be monthly meetings. What we really wanted to impress here was the nursing peer review as defined in our board rules. We are very unique and very lucky to have nursing peer review in our laws and rules, allows for that, that self-regulation to an extent of nursing practice to improve the practice. So we really wanted to add the words that go along with our board rules. All right, and our next one will be knowledge. It'll be 4B, yes. So you will see here that this talks about confidentiality regulations. We all know the quintessential HIPAA. That's what we teach and educate our nurses about. However, we thought that maybe that was a little bit, with the advances in electronic health records and even social media, that there are so many different regulations related to a patient's confidentiality that perhaps we should just strike through the HIPAA and leave that more broad, more global, so that we can encompass all of those regulations that evolve as practice evolves. All right, and our next one will be the same concept. So again, here we're talking about maintaining confidentiality. Before it said according to HIPAA guidelines, the same applies here, that there are so many guidelines that we felt, let's just leave it a little bit more broad with maintaining confidentiality. All right, and moving on. So you will see here that I believe, as Chris discussed earlier, we, Chris and I, we both collapsed A and D, so then you'll start to see our lettering change a little bit, and that's just because we're moving those letters up. So here you will see in the clinical judgments and behaviors that we changed the verb. Before it was participate to facilitate. So this is in relation to the ADN and BSN levels, in which before it said participate in decision-making related to delegation and assigning tasks. And we really felt that when you look at our laws and rules, the RN is so much more involved in that decision-making process. In the end, the delegation decision is that of the RN or in conjunction with the patient. So we really felt, instead of saying that the nurse or the RN participates in it, really that RN is facilitating that decision-making process. There's so many different steps that RN has to go through in order to make that final delegation decision, that he or she is really facilitating that decision-making process. So just making the word a little bit more of a reflection of the actions. All right, and now to our next one. So you'll see here, this is where the new lettering is coming. And then we have our new G. So this one is the one that I would like to say is a brainchild of Dr. Hooper. So she has done a ton of research over the past couple of years about what is new in practice and really making sure that these decks align with where we are headed. I would say that when I first read this, I think I had the current situation of the pandemic in my head, and I couldn't really wrap around the sheer brilliance of Dr. Hooper until I really dug into the research that's out there. So I'll give you some thoughts on how I wanted to deliver this, things that you might think of when you think of. So in each of these, there's the word local and global. And so I really was having a hard time going, okay, so I see how a pandemic is global. How are we going to incorporate global into local? And so I just wanted to kind of give y'all some thoughts that I had when I really dug into this, so that I'll read through my thoughts and then give everybody a chance to kind of read through each of these areas of knowledge. So the section on global health is proposed to meet the current need for nursing to be knowledgeable and have nurses to be knowledgeable and have skills to provide at their scope of practice for a local and global perspective. The proposed knowledge areas and clinical judgment and behaviors are based upon the information in current literature on global and population health and its effects on the local community. This proposed competency is, of course, very timely, and we see it's what's occurring in our local communities and across the world that impacts patients' health. So the concepts that you see here are from the local level up to the global level. The idea that global health impacts our local patients, their health, and that our patients then in turn affect the global health. So some concepts that I really looked into when I was looking into this section is things or concepts, not just the pandemic that we're going through currently, but pollution, water availability, poverty, food security, shelter. So patients access to the basics that they need for their health. Disasters, climate change, looking at the current hurricane season, how many hurricanes we have, how many different populations that impacts. The California wildfires, which then impact populations, their availability to reach healthcare resources, and also even pollution. So then kind of wrapping back. Pandemics, diseases, as we look at being on the cusp of vaccinations, what's the accessibility for vaccinations? What are the vaccination rates? What's the safe development of a vaccination? Environmental health, work exposures, education. So all of these really relate to those social determinants of health. So when you look at these and read through these, I'll give you a minute when I stop talking to kind of process what we mean by global health is really what we mean by these individual communities and then how together that impacts the world, or in the case of a pandemic, how something that's going on across the world impacts our individual communities. So board staff suggests that this competency be reevaluated again in 2 years for its effectiveness, since this is a current and changing concept. So I'll give you a minute to read through that. Okay, so we've given you all a little bit of time to read through this section. As I've described and everyone else has described, this is brand new. There's a lot here, but I hope that we've kind of given you a perspective of the great work of Dr. Hooper and what she was doing when she compiled all of this research. So looking into some of the questions, I think we are moving into some of the other areas, but I'll give everybody a little bit of time and send it back over to Dr. McKnight to work us through all of those other suggestions.
So Elise, thank you for the compliment. It's nothing, this whole new body of knowledge. That's why I feel like in 2 years, how do we look at this? But I was very surprised as many times as I've read the DECs, see that under patient safety advocacy, we also talk about epidemic and pandemic and prevention and control. So that's thinking about it from the safety perspective. But here we're looking at it from a sense of being a part of a team when there's a global issue. So that's very good. One thing we wanted to mention earlier, I forgot, was that when these DECs were created 10 years ago, we tried to provide it so that if you wanted to only look at member of a profession or member of the healthcare team, you could take that role out and you wouldn't have to rely on what was in the other roles. So sometimes when you're reading the whole DECs, and I'm sure you can't wait to sit down and read the whole DECs by yourself, we'll appreciate there is some repetition, but it's been done on purpose.
So this is Kristen. I just wanted to highlight Karen Schwinn's comment added to the chat box a few minutes ago. And so she comments that regarding vulnerable patients on page 45, she is recommending that it be included in the LVN knowledge, possibly worded to recognize vulnerable population definition. So we'll definitely add that to that page for the final.
I thought that was very important too, Chris, because the LVN may, by having that knowledge, recognize a patient that needs to be referred or given special attention. So I think that is a very good point. When it's too quiet, I have to talk, so excuse me. One of the things when we realized that A and D under member of the healthcare team were so similar and we could merge them together, and then we realized we needed a totally separate competency for global health. We're kind of glad that we had that switch, that we're just not adding on every time we review these because it could get unmanageable. So I think 25 is a nice number. I don't know what you think.
Are there any other questions on member of the healthcare profession, or was there any notifications in the chat box?
This is Beverly. There's another comment from Tara. I don't know if you want me to read that. Yeah, it's agree. This is very timely and very needed. I appreciate the distinction between what knowledge is needed and how it translates to actions in the clinical judgment and behavior section. But should non-emergent and pandemic concerns also have actionable consideration in the clinical judgment and behavior section? It's a question.
This is Tara. I'll explain, I guess, a little bit further. So everything in the clinical judgment behavior section is referring to during an emergency or a pandemic, but I know in several previous sections ago that we discussed the social trends and things of that nature, but should we not have something here during non-emergencies or non-pandemic that we're not just waiting for something to occur? And this might only impact the BSN level, maybe the ADN, and maybe not so much at all for the VNs, but should they not be working on, know of, and display clinical judgment and behaviors based on what potentially could happen and have that forethought? Excuse me.
Do we have anything like that now?
I believe when we were meeting internally, I wanted to say that we talked about perhaps, I can't remember exactly which one, but I wanted to say clinical judgments and behaviors that we talked about promotion and prevention, and perhaps adding in the word prevention to some of those. Would that address the concept that you're talking about?
Yes.
We did add prevention.
We did, but I can't remember where.
What page was that on?
Hi, this is Renee Schumann. Hi, are you talking about prevention or anticipation of another event, and always being in anticipation of to head it off mode?
Yes, exactly.
It's in number G. It's in the main competency. Assist the healthcare teams during global health or pandemics to promote health, safety, and prevent disease. Does that cover it enough? I think that's a good point, that as a team, we'll have another meeting and we'll go through and look to make sure we have enough, Tara. So thank you for bringing that up. It's preparation, really.
I think of disaster preparedness in our curriculum, something along that line. So if there's nothing else with that area, we'll move on to plans for gathering feedback and distribution of the document. Not sure who's taking on that.
Well, this is Kristen. I'll get us started here. So I think, one of the things that we're really wanting to tackle is, once the updates are made, having a really solid plan for disseminating them. And obviously, educators use them all the time. But one of the things we learned, and we've known for a while, but we really learned during our summit early in February, was that a lot of practice representatives are not as familiar with the DECs. But as far as, the first steps of getting feedback, obviously we're here today for that, and we welcome any of your ideas or edits, either now or, if you think of something after the meeting, send us an email and we'll certainly add that for consideration. But we also thought we would develop a survey where we try to create an efficient way to look at the suggested changes and send them out to faculty, and perhaps, sorry, Dr. Kuiper, to put you on the spot, but maybe ask if TONL or if the Texas Nurses Association would feel comfortable, or any of your organizations that represent practice, sending it out to get some feedback with about a 2-week window.
Yeah, I think that would be easy for tonal. Yeah, if you just want to frame it how you want it sent, and Debbie Peterson, who's our CPM manager, could do that.
Great.
One of the things, Kristen, that came out of the summit was a realization that we need to get the decks out there, especially for practice people. So I'm very pleased with it. I'd like to hear from some others of you, maybe you weren't quite as familiar with the decks, about your impressions or any ideas that you have. No teacher, I can call on somebody. Okay, Karen Kendrick, was this new to you, or were you familiar, or what are your thoughts?
You know, I'd heard of the decks. I knew they existed, but I wasn't particularly real well acquainted with them. And I will add that, you know, as the Texas Hospital Association, will certainly help with distribution of your survey. Always happy to support that work to get more out. But I'm very impressed, and I can see how helpful these would be on the practice side. For the utilization with particularly job descriptions and role development and setting those expectations at the outset. I think that perhaps maybe this is part of what is at the root of sometimes what is a discord between practice, academia and practice, that transition period for that new nurse and the expectations of one side and the deliverables to the expectations from the others. So I think that this is a great opportunity to kind of bridge that if it's disseminated to everyone. Happy to help.
When we were starting with the task force that led up to the summit, we had a really great group of practice people and administrators with us. We asked them to bring in their job description for nurses, and we really looked at that to make sure that our decks were in line with what they were looking for when they hired nurses. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Okay, Renee Schumann, you've been a teacher and an administrator, and now you're representing TNA. What are your thoughts as you hear this?
I'm very excited about this. I know TNA is going to be excited. I was thrilled to be nominated by them, and I can't wait to take this information back to them when it's ready for it. I am especially excited about the new content on the global health part. I think that's very well done. I've been looking at and making notes of. I have my big screen over here. You guys are on my iPad over here, so I'm back and forth. And I've been making notes on it. I'm excited to be able to see this from the academic and the practice side with TNA. So and academically, you know, all of this, well, the schools include all of this, and it's great when you're going up for accreditation for whatever body you're with, because the decks are already there. All the other states are jealous because they don't have it. And so it makes our jobs a lot easier when we're going through that part. I'm eager to share this when it's completed, and to finish whatever work has to be done to get it out there. Yes, thank you very much for this.
Adam, you're new to us today. What have you thought about how things are looking?
No, excellent. Just like was said before, the new global health information on here, coming from a background of firefighting, EMT, and also training soldiers in the state guard. I really like to see that because, you know, I've responded to hurricane emergencies, things like, you know, and events like that in the past that has happened to us here in Texas. And I was just really happy to see that updated today. And I'm really excited to kind of let all the LVNs know, all of our members know, because we do have some members that are military members that are, you know, here in Texas. And kind of let them know about that. So it was really exciting.
Thank you for being here. You know, it's really helpful when we start talking about the LVN level. We need LVNs in here so we can make sure we do it right.
No, absolutely.
Joan, you're very familiar with the DECs. What do you think about the suggestions?
I love the suggestions. I think it's much more realistic and current with practice today. And I think it gives better guidelines. I think the verbiage is clearer, that they're easy to understand and takes a lot of that gray matter, that gray area out of it, and gives much more much stronger guidelines on what can be expected. And I was happy to see the LVN, I guess lack of a better term, beefed up a little bit, because I think that helps, because that's what they're seeing in the hospital these days.
Yes,
on
yes.
more roles, especially when you get into long-term care, and this gives them that scope to be able to do it.
You're saying simplistic. I don't know if Jackie Ballestero, she's hiding somewhere. She's one of our administrative people, but she has designed some conceptual pictures of the DECs. They are fabulous. You're going to love them because it narrows it down to this is what we're about. But we're not showing you that today, I don't think. So later. Karen Schwind, you had a nice comment earlier. Do you have any other comments?
I do. I've been waiting for my turn. I just want to be sure you can hear me.
Yes.
So from a school nursing standpoint, this is really excellent. We so often, because of the independent role that we have in the school, we struggle with where our scope is and where our practice is, and just defining the difference between the LVN, the diploma, the ADN, and the BSN, I think was really helpful for me to be able to share that, and I think it will validate indeed the practice that we're seeing and the change in our practice that we're seeing. As you may or may not know, not all schools have school nurses, but those that do, some school nurses are registered nurses, which we prefer, BSNs, which we prefer, but we also see a lot of districts choose to hire LVNs and ADs, and sometimes not even a person with a license. So when we were talking earlier about delegation of tasks and then all of the global issues, that's opened up a whole nother side of public health, which school nurses typically prepare for, but not prepare for the extent that we've been involved in with this pandemic. So once again, I'm really excited to share. The National Association of School Nurses has a framework for school nurse practice for the 21st century, which we base a lot of our practice issues on. And very pleasingly, this aligns very nicely with what the DECs do as well. And I'm looking forward to reading and seeing more. And again, thank you for including school nurses. I'm very glad to be able to represent them.
Thank you. I think Adam had something else. He keeps.
Oh, sorry. Yes. I just, from working in long-term care and also working in acute care, it also helps to really clarify that role, because in the long-term care unit, my role is going to be completely different versus whenever I work over at Fort Sam. And a lot of times I think that can get kind of mixed up because in a hospital setting, the VN is going to be practicing right at that tip of scope of practice, right there. And then versus in the long-term care, you really are really familiar with your scope. So this is I just kind of wanted to throw that in there.
And I'm going to say to Tamara sits on the board of nursing. You'll be seeing this as a board member before too long. How do you think the board will look at this? What do you think the board will think of these suggestions? Turn your mic on. Turn your mic on.
There we go. I am so sorry. I moved into my parents' house and I'm having technical difficulties. So I am always so impressed with the work that you guys do, and you're always very thorough. I really think the board is going to be very impressed with the changes you have made. You've been very clear. I think you've been very timely. I think that the board will be very excited. It does hit on all the different levels very clearly. And I think they're going to be impressed as always. You always do a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tamara.
Yes.
Now you can mute. Okay. Tara, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I'm very familiar with the DECs already, being in education in all pre-licensure levels. However, I will say what I love about how you've laid the document out even further, it's really going to help in our system where we take expert clinicians and transition them back to novice educators and helping them grow in their instruction practice. It's really going to help them, I think, just as much as it helps the students to understand the difference in scopes. I mean, we can read the scope of practice, but this really lays it out for them and what's the difference between all levels. And I think it's going to help the faculty just as much as it does the students at this point.
April. You have any comments, April? I don't know if she can hear me. April Ernst. Oh. Okay, Chris, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yeah, it looks like maybe it got a little frozen there for a second. So I guess, what we have to decide and what the work group should decide is, where do we go from here? I think our natural inclination is to take back all your comments and staff would meet internally and revise the draft changes. And then we could disseminate that out through surveys, not only to the work group, but to a broader audience, and give a couple of weeks for feedback. And then we would incorporate those and bring those to the board. It's possible we could have this done in time for the January board meeting, which would be fantastic. But, I think that kind of depends on how much feedback we do get after the survey.
Yes, I'm excited about this, especially, a lot of educators may have been included. Hello, can you hear me? Oops. Can you hear me? No, it's not coming on. Can you hear me now? Can't hear me? I thought I was unmuted. Cannot hear me now?
I can hear whoever's talking.
Sorry. Oh, man.
We can hear you now.
Hear me at all?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, I think we lost April. I think maybe her internet connection is a little unstable. I wonder if we could post the phone number in the chat box. Maybe she could connect that way through phone.
This is Karen at THA while we're waiting for April. Just want to be sensitive to our CNOs in our hospitals right now. With the increase in the COVID cases and the expectation of a very quick turnaround on a document as large as this, I just want to throw that out there to take that into consideration, especially in certain part of our state. They are totally overwhelmed.
It's an excellent
I
point.
think with tonal, we will probably more than likely send it to the board and get their feedback, and that's representative of each district. So, and from our end, I don't think we would bombard the CNO. So that's a good point.
I think it's really important that the 25 are looked at carefully, maybe not as much on the other details.
That might be a good point to minimize as much as possible what you're asking them to look at rather than the entire document. Although it's going to be a great opportunity to start educating people about the existence of it and how they can utilize it.
And piggybacking onto Karen's comments, what do you all think is the best way to disseminate afterward? Would it be a virtual meeting where we invite representatives from education and practice? Would it be, I mean, of course, we'll put it in our bulletin. I'm sure there are lots of other ways. Push it through social media. And I think any
Yes, we
ideas
might be
anyone
able to
has.
put together a webinar that could be watched on their own time.
Yeah.
Existence of it and how they can utilize it.
And piggybacking onto Karen, what do you all think is the best way to? I think we just had some feedback from someone who wasn't muted.
We could also do something similar with our advisory board meetings, you know, add that in, because we have to have those once a year anyway. So that might just be another big topic of conversation.
That's a great idea.
Chris, tonal board meets monthly, so definitely that would be a good avenue.
Great.
You know, Dr. McKnight, you've done a beautiful job of chairing this, and we didn't really give you a chance to give in any of your personal insights.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. I'm really excited to see the changes in the language moving forward. I think Tara brought up orientation of new faculty, which gave me a slight bit of flashback, trauma-esque type things. When I came into education was when the third edition was going live. So think in terms of remapping every course learning and program learning outcome for the new faculty, which was myself and one other person for an entire program. So little flashback, but it also made me understand. I mean, I knew these from semester one. I could tell you these backwards and forwards, and I will probably ask my new faculty to do the same. But yeah, the verbiage, having been in practice in leadership and in academia and leadership, the language, it's clear, it's more concise, it brings up what we're challenged with in nursing as well in the US right now. So I think we are definitely on point and moving in the right direction, which makes me love our profession and our board even more. So I guess the next question would be, does anyone else have any comments on dissemination, feedback, distributions? Renee?
I have one question. This is Renee Schumann. Hi. So the AACN East, the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, is updating their essentials and taking out, you know, the undergrad, baccalaureate and masters and all that kind of language, and changing it into something else. And so when the schools who are CCNE accredited or who are using the essentials anyway, whether they're ASIN or CNEA accredited, do they need to continue? I mean, we still all will map our curriculum to the DECs. We'll have crosswalks to the DECs and to the essentials or whatever else is our accrediting body. I guess my question has to do with, because I know my faculty are going to ask me this. How would we manage to make a comparison, if such is possible, between the DECs this way and the new essentials for AACN? Is that clear? I mean, is that really confusing? I'm going to mute now.
I think the essentials are focused on different things, and they're focused more on the curriculum itself. And we are focused on competency. So I know that the new buzzwords are competency-based. Education is competency-based. And, you know, I see us more going in that way when we're looking at the, not just the effectiveness of a program, but whether the student has achieved objectives. And, you know, I've looked at those essentials and they're a little more philosophical. They're just a different model.
Thank you. I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, Renee, what we're doing is we're taking each set individually. So looking at them not all together, but we're starting one by one because of that. We did insights last year, so because it's going to be pretty complicated by the time it's done.
It's true. We'll talk later. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any more feedback or recommendations? Okay. Anything in the chat box before we have a virtual meeting and a podcast? I like podcasts. Tamara, I hadn't thought about that either. So there's a couple of other recommendations. Well, with this, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fitton to see if there's anything final from there, or if we need to make action decisions or what our next steps would be.
Let me just throw one other thing in. You know, your names will all be listed in the new DECs as being a part of this committee, so for good or bad.
I think we've had a very efficient meeting. Thank you guys so much. I think it would probably be proper to entertain one of the work group members making a motion to direct board staff to seek further feedback through surveys based on the input today.
Perfect. Do we have a motion?
This is April Ernst, just checking to see if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so do we have a motion from the work group committee for movement forward with the board members and the board and the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Raise your hand. Motion carries. As I skipped discussion, sorry.
Great, and then I think just a final motion to adjourn. We'll see you on that.
Perfect. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
This is Joan Becker. The meeting.
Okay, a second.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you all again for today and all the great work from the Board of Nursing. You've done an amazing job with this resource, and I look forward to seeing the further edits.
And the board staff applaud you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. And just for the record, it's 1:11 p.m. Okay.
Thanks.